In the quiet, misty valleys of northern Europe and beyond, where the wind whispers secrets through the heather and the rugged hills keep ancient tales close to their heart, there existed a peculiar and eerie tradition, the ritual of the Sin Eater. The Sin Eater was a figure known in nearly every village, a person who, for a nominal payment given in the form of food, took upon themselves the sins of a deceased person. As soon as a death occurred, this official was notified. Presenting right away to the deceased's home, he was given at the door a groat, an old silver coin, along with bread and ale. Having partaken of the meal, he took upon himself the sins of the deceased, for whom he had thus pawned his own soul. On the most basic level, the Sin Eater is an individual who nominates themselves to take on the sins of another person, usually who has died before death rites and absolution could be performed. An earlier and cruder form of the ceremony involved bringing the Sin Eater into the chamber of the deceased. There he received food, sometimes along with money, across the body of the corpse. Having eaten the food in the presence of the dead, he was driven out of the house with curses and abuse. Sticks, cinders, and every available missile were hurled at him, symbolically expelling the sins from the community. The origins of sin eating are seemingly multiple and diluted by the passage of time. However, the practice and imagery spring up cross-culturally. The Aztec goddess of filth, Tlazolteotl, is often depicted providing redemptive salvation to individuals after death by eating the filth of the soul. The ancient Egyptians held that the heart was a ledger of one's life deeds, both virtuous and vile, and crucial for judgment in the afterlife. In solemn ritual after death, the heart is placed on a scale and weighed against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth and justice. Anubis, the formidable jackal-headed god of embalming, stands vigil over the scales, while Thoth, wise ibis-headed god of writing, meticulously records the verdict. Should the heart balance with the feather, it signifies a well-lived life, rendering the individual worthy of eternal bliss in the paradise of Osiris. Many societies have a concept of a preordained individual designated to suffer and atone for the sins of others, such as the sacral king. Jesus Christ can be seen setting a precedent for sin eaters by sacrificing his pure soul for the sins of the world. The ritual itself of the sin eater is simple. The nominated person eats a meal over the corpse. This ensures the spiritual safety of the dead and safe passage of the soul to heaven. Through the literal consumption of bread, wine, or burial cakes, the eater would consume the sins of the person, freeing the deceased of their sins and earthly ties, thus allowing them to gain an appropriate Christian burial. Prayers would then be said over the corpse to cement the ritual. Prayers such as, "I give easement and rest now to thee. Come not down lanes or in our meadows, and for thy peace I pawn my soul." Sin eating also served a practical purpose, ensuring the village was safe from the sin-ridden dead. Without the appropriate death rites, it was believed that the dead would be left to wander and cause harm to the local area. By removing the sins from the physical body, there was nothing blocking the passage to heaven, severing the ties to the mortal world and leaving the village spook-free. Though there is some speculation regarding when the practice began, the first concrete mention of it dates to the 1600s. Diarist John Aubrey writes that at funerals they would hire poor people who were to take upon themselves the sins of the party deceased. when the corpse was brought out of the house and laid on the bier, a loaf of bread was delivered to the sin eater over the corpse, along with a bowl of beer, which he was to drink up. Early sin eaters were pitiable figures condemned to the fringes of society. They were outcasts, embodying the very essence of evil in the eyes of their community. The ritual of sin eating transferred the sins of the deceased onto the sin eater, leading many to believe that these individuals remained perpetually tainted by malevolence. Some chose this grim profession, living isolated and shunned like lepers. Their presence was so feared that people avoided them, seeking them out only when death struck. The most successful sin eaters became notorious for their unsettling demeanour, simultaneously humble, repulsive, and sinister. For the cunning, sin eating proved lucrative as they preyed upon the deep-seated superstitions of the masses. The emphasis on poor people being the ideal candidates for sin eating is significant. These individuals, often from the most marginalised areas of society, think drunkards, beggars, poor, vulnerable, were seen as already corrupted and therefore of less spiritual worth. The practice added yet another layer of stigma to their already harsh lives. By the late 19th century, the practice had mostly declined. However, Richard Munslow, the last recorded sin eater, briefly revived it. Born in 1833 in the village of Rattlinghope near Shrewsbury, Munslow was not a typical sin eater. He was a successful farmer, but he suffered a tragic loss, 4 of his children, including 3 in a single week. It's speculated that this tragedy drove him to practice the sin-eating trade, at first as a form of grieving to help his children on into the afterlife. Sin-eating had mostly died out by the early 20th century, yet its echoes persist in literature and folklore. The concept found its way to Appalachia in the United States, where it survived as legends about nomads who roamed the countryside looking to absorb dark and powerful sins. The practice, though gone, leaves behind a legacy of human desperation, hope, and the lengths we go to secure peace for our loved ones. Richard Munslow, Shropshire's last sin eater, is buried in St Margaret's Churchyard, his name enshrined in the folklore of the region. In 2010, his grave was restored by the local community, a tribute to his role in this haunting tradition. Thank you for joining us for another spooky short. Make sure to follow, subscribe, say hi on social media, and leave us a review to help others discover our work.
Thanks for listening, and fuck yeah, folklore.
Fuck yeah, folklore.